Hey there. Welcome to Mindful Self-Compassion, creating an emotionally resilient life through connection, presence, and ending the war on yourself. My name is Michelle Walter. I am the owner and founder of Life from the Summit, and I'm so glad you're here watching this. You're probably watching this because you fall somewhere between a tiny bit curious about self-compassion to an avid fan of self-compassion. Wherever you fall, I hope that this talk plants just a seed or two about what I believe is the practice that holds one of the keys, if not the key, to really stepping into the fulfilling and purposeful life that you want for yourself. I believe, and in my experience, that self compassion can help you be the kind of person who can really embody that amazing 1997 song, Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba. I get knocked down and I get up again. You're never going to keep me down, right? Such an awesome song. Because when you are as kind to yourself as you are to the people you love the most, then external factors and opinions bounce off of you like there's a force field around you. So I invite you to settle in, keep an open mind, and let's talk about how self compassion can be your greatest superpower. But before we get into the nitty gritty of self compassion and the science, which I love, I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm here. I am not here talking to you about self compassion because I practice it all day, every day, and never beat myself up anymore. It is quite the opposite. Self compassion is a minute by minute, day by day struggle bus for me. I grew up most of my life in a trailer park in rural Nebraska before we moved to a non portable house on the other side of town across a dirt road from a cornfield. So self compassion was not in my vocabulary. I come from a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, stop your whining, look around, and you'll always find someone who has it worse, give more than you receive mentality. And granted, that mentality got me pretty far. I was an environmental litigator with the US Department of Justice for 20 years. I spent a few years at a law firm in the middle of that career. I became a marathoner and a 3-time Ironman during that time. And I started mountaineering and climbing the 14,000 foot mountains here in Colorado, as well as Mount Rainier in Washington. So I'm an expert of going hard and being hard on myself. I just thought that's how you accomplished anything. And then in 2012, my mom died suddenly of a heart attack at the very young age of 58. And she had been the source of all of my love and confidence. She was my biggest cheerleader and supporter. And when she was gone, so was that love and support. So I began a really slow road to burnout and anxiety. And in 2008, I found myself sitting in my dark closet, crying, and really feeling like it didn't matter if I woke up the next day or not. I felt like me and my life were totally purposeless and meant absolutely nothing. Fortunately, through some chance meetings, I found a certified coaching program and a mindfulness meditation teacher certification program. And so over the next 2 years, I put myself through these programs while working full time at DOJ. I started my business on the side with the goal of quitting my federal government job once I got my 20 years in. And I did. On June 4th of 2021, in the middle of a pandemic, I took the leap, quit my job, and I've been a full-time entrepreneur ever since. But I could not have done any of that, and I couldn't keep doing it every day, especially when it gets really tough, without knowing how to be kind to myself, how to give myself the same compassion that I've always known how to give to other people. So I am not here as some idealistic self-compassion advocate. I know it's hard. I know it's bumpy and clunky, and I know it is a constant practice. So before we jump into what self-compassion is, I want to note that in your materials along with this video, you have a Mindfulness Foundations guidebook. This contains some critical background on what mindfulness meditation is, clears up some myths about mindfulness, and has some additional resources. I'm not going to cover those basics here, so please make sure to review that guidebook, okay? Now, on to self-compassion. Let's get our bearings by defining what self-compassion is. There are 3 components of self-compassion, and we'll practice these in the guided meditation that I've linked in your other resource in your materials, which is a self-compassion resources sheet. So make sure to check that out too. Those 3 elements of self-compassion are mindfulness, remembering a shared common humanity, and kindness or compassion. So let's break those down a little bit. First, there's the mindfulness piece. As your guidebook explains, mindfulness is essentially awareness. It's paying attention on purpose to the present moment. You have to first be aware that you're having judgments about yourself and you're experiencing difficult sensations and emotions in some moment. You bring in mindfulness to pay attention on purpose to what you're experiencing in that moment. The second component is that you remind yourself that your experience is part of a larger human experience, that you are not alone. You remember the shared common humanity that we are all a part of. Remembering that everyone experiences pain, even though each person's pain is their own and everybody's pain is different. Every single person who is alive right now has or will experience pain. And then third, you offer yourself kindness or compassion. You treat yourself the same way that you treat a good friend. You care for, soothe, and protect yourself. But how do you really do that? There are a couple of ways, and we'll work with this in the guided meditation that's in your resources. We can work with it by finding words or phrases that may feel supportive for you, like, may I be safe, may I be happy, may I be at peace. Or you can do something even more simple, like, I'm here, it's okay, letting yourself know that you're there for yourself. Or even just an acknowledgement that this sucks, I feel bad. Then you can also offer a soothing gesture, like putting a hand on your heart or on your stomach. You can even clasp your hands together, maybe. This kind of supportive gesture actually helps activate the body's caregiving system to calm your nervous system. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So those are the 3 elements. Really sounds pretty simple, right? But the amazing thing is that once you practice these 3 components in a meditation practice and what I call a formal practice, like your guidebook talks about, you start to build those components like a muscle. And then you can call on them in the moment, what I call informally throughout the day. So if you're having a conversation with someone and they say something hurtful, or you find yourself criticizing yourself for something you said, you can quickly tick through these 3 components in your mind and cultivate some self-compassion in the moment. Now let's shift, and I want to talk about what self-compassion is not, which requires also understanding compassion itself. Self-compassion and compassion are not pity or sympathy. Pity and sympathy are feeling sorry for yourself or someone else. Compassion and self-compassion also are different from empathy. Empathy is being able to feel what it's like to be in someone else's shoes and maybe feel their pain, or in the case of yourself, maybe saying something like, yeah, I've felt this way before. So what compassion and self-compassion actually are is empathy combined with action to alleviate the pain. So, for example, you may walk by someone on the street asking for help, and you could have pity or empathy and keep on walking. But when you have compassion, you can have that empathy and take action to help. So, with self compassion, you bring in that action, that component of action as well, and act to help or support yourself. Now, that's kind of the nuts and bolts, and it sounds nice and easy enough, right? But then why is self compassion so hard? And what are the barriers that people have to self compassion? In your self compassion resources sheet in the materials, I linked to a couple of websites from doctors Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer. These are two of the leading, if not the leading, experts in self compassion. And they've identified 5 basic misgivings or myths about self compassion. First, that self compassion is self pity. Second, that it means weakness. Third, that it will undermine motivation. Fourth, that it's self indulgent. And 5, that it's selfish or narcissistic. There's a lot of data on this, but I'm going to keep it real simple. Since 2003, there have been over 1,200 studies, probably even more than that now. And all of those studies refute all 5 of those myths. Those studies show that self-compassion leads to less rumination and less self-absorption. It creates more strength, more coping, more resilience. It can reduce the fear of failure. So you try harder because setbacks won't derail you as badly. Remember tub thumping? Get knocked down and get up again. There's more motivation and persistence. It allows you to learn to have healthier behaviors and boundaries that don't exhaust you because you actually care about yourself. So you can learn to give without over-giving and draining yourself because you have boundaries and respect for yourself. I want to clarify here too that self-compassion is not self-esteem. Self-esteem is based on external circumstances and other people's evaluations of you. But self-compassion isn't based on external circumstances. You deserve self-compassion because you're a human being. With self-compassion, you don't have to feel better than other people in order to feel good about yourself. With self-esteem, you want to feel better than other people. Overall, what all the science, the studies show is that self-compassion is linked to more well-being. Reductions in anxiety, depression, stress, perfectionism, shame, body dissatisfaction, eating issues. And I want to say that self-compassion is particularly important for anyone in marginalized communities, people of color, the LGBTQIA+ communities, from large aggressions to microaggressions. Self-compassion is really important for people in marginalized communities to be able to build their resilience, to care for themselves, to set healthy boundaries, and be able to care for others without exhausting themselves. In addition, I've included a link to a book by Dr. Neff called Fierce Self-Compassion, which is a fantastic resource for women to build different qualities or types of self-compassion. So despite all this science, not only are there myths, but there can be a lot of internal resistance to self-compassion when you first start to practice it. First of all, there can be what we call backdraft. So think of when a house is on fire. The firefighters don't burst into the house because there could be a huge explosion from the heat and intensity of that fire. So they poke little holes around the house to let some air in so the fire can breathe. And then they go in slowly. When you start to practice self-compassion, it's like there has been a fire burning inside you, trapped inside your heart and your body. There could be old pain or memories about being unloved or unaccepted that could start to surface. So you want to go in slowly. And if you start to feel discomfort, back out of the practice. Go cuddle with your pet or go for a walk. Give yourself some care, which that's an act of compassion in and of itself. And then come back to the practice when you're ready. Second, it can be really difficult to want to give yourself compassion, feeling like you don't deserve it, or even learning how to do it. So it can help to imagine someone else who you know really loves you showing you kindness or compassion, or to think about how you would show compassion to a good friend if they were struggling with something, and then turn that around toward yourself. And we'll walk through this a bit in the guided meditation practice I have linked for you in your self compassion resource sheet. And third, self compassion can just feel clunky and weird. I get it, totally normal. Saying certain phrases to yourself or giving yourself a kind gesture that can seem really awkward. That's okay. It's a practice. Going to the gym for the first time feels awkward. So find phrases or gestures that work for you, that allow you to kind of ease in again. I want to end here with the practical implications of what happens when we treat ourselves like our own worst enemy instead of treating ourselves like we would treat a good friend. I think it helps to understand the physiology, exactly what goes on in your body when you're hard on yourself, when you say all those little tiny comments. So there are two important parts of our brain and our nervous system, the reptilian brain and mammalian brain. The reptilian brain is responsible for our fight, flight, or freeze response. And that gets triggered when we perceive any kind of threat, no matter how small or large. It pumps hormones like adrenaline and cortisol into our system so that we can fight, run away, or play dead. The mammalian part of the brain kicks in to restore and heal. It pumps out the feel-good hormones that restore us, like oxytocin and endorphins. That fight, flight, or freeze reaction is meant to only last for really short periods of time. It is very draining. And without the restorative power of the mammalian brain, we can really start to wreak havoc on our bodies when we are constantly in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, which nowadays is kind of where we are as a baseline. So many things feel like threats to us, from traffic to our supervisors, our family and friends, the news, social media, not to mention more extreme threats such as racism, sexism, violence, COVID. Our brains perceive us to be constantly under attack. So our bodies have high baselines of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol pumping through them. This leads to a whole litany of issues, from things like heart disease and addiction to anxiety and depression. And here's the real eye-opener. Our brains can't tell the difference between being threatened by an outside source versus when we're attacking ourselves through our own criticism and unhealthy behaviors. It triggers the same fight, flight, or freeze response when you criticize yourself. So whether it's the outside world or the inner world that's putting you under attack, we need to learn how to downregulate that reptilian brain and help the mammalian caregiving brain kick in so that you can heal and restore. And that's what self-compassion does. It activates that caregiving system, those hormones of oxytocin and endorphins, so that we can downregulate and not be in fight, flight, or freeze so much. It's really important to remember that we're not practicing self-compassion to make ourselves feel better. We're giving ourselves compassion because you are experiencing pain and you're a human being. That's it. You deserve compassion because you experience pain. So I invite you to think of all the ways that you're being unkind to yourself. Remember that you're human and deserve compassion, and practice the guided meditation in your materials. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions or need further support in developing your self-compassion or mindfulness practice, please reach out to me at michelle@lifefromthesummit.com. May you stay safe and well.